Welcome to Everything is Everything. I don't know if you can see us, but I'm Amit, and this is my good friend Ajay. We are shrouded in darkness today. The light of freedom has gone out of our lives. Everyone thought intervention will show us the way, that the state will be like the bright shining sun, which will give us illumination. But instead, it burnt everything to the ground and there is no power anymore. I'm being a little bit over dramatic here, but this episode is about the dangers of state intervention and when it can fail. And most importantly, what are the metrics by which we can figure out that should the state intervene or should the state not? And when should the light of freedom shine?
Let's shed some light on the matter. Welcome, gentle reader. I want to start at the Amit Varma and Ajay Shah lament that state intervention is a messy business. Okay, our greatest disagreement with the climate of opinion in India is about optimism on the state. All too often, the state embarks on ambitious projects and these things just go wrong. Again and again, failure is the norm. And we just don't get how people can be so optimistic that the state should do this, the state should do that. The state is overburdened, it's doing too many things, it's failing all the time. What we need is a whole intellectual toolkit around understanding the kind of things where failure is likely and can we do better.
And I want to add to that this is one in a series of episodes, but we're not repeating any of the concepts. Episode 25, episode 26, 33, 91, 92, 99 are all broadly part of a family of episodes in which we examine the Indian state and and not just the Indian state, but the concept of the state. When should the state intervene, and when is it not appropriate for it to do so, and everything that can go wrong. So please do check all those episodes out as well.
So on the conceptual toolkit, we've actually done many pieces, but I just want like a few sentence restatement. Why does state intervention go wrong? Okay. Problem one, information. The world is too complex. There's the conceit of thinking that you know what's happening in the world. Actually, you don't. So the government makes mistakes because the true facts about the society are unknowable. Okay, that's reason one. Then problem two, public choice theory. We have an episode on this where there is a conflict of interest between the incentives of the personnel of the state versus the objectives that we might like for the state. Problem three, political economy. All real world behavior of the government is kicked around by special interest groups who have a disproportionate interest in trying to manipulate the working of the government. And there is the broad terminology around state capability, that the government starts trying to do something, but they mess it up. They are not able to implement. They are not competent in a way for all these reasons. So this is the broad environment of diffidence that we bring to this table, that when somebody says the government will do one new thing, inwardly we are groaning that, look, it's not going to work too well. There will be law of unintended consequences. You guys will make mistakes. There will be problems of state capability. Things will go wrong. Okay, so can we do better?
So, in episode 26 and in episode 99, in a manner of speaking, we discussed when is it appropriate for the government to intervene. I want to ask you a separate question today that we are examining, that one of the factors that goes into when a government should intervene or should not intervene is not just if the intervention is justified, but also whether it is possible, whether it is going to work, how hard or easy it is.
The great economist Jeff Hammer always said to me that when we think about public policy, we should always bring implementation constraints on the table. Like right up front, start thinking, can we do it? Do we have the ability to do it? Is this an easy problem? Is this a difficult problem? Okay, and that's our main subject of today. So let's start at a military analogy. Suppose we are in a discussion where a hypothetical Indian expeditionary force is considering landings in Burma versus landings in China. Okay, in a flash, we know that, yeah, both are very hard, but push comes to shove, a sufficiently complex Indian naval operation could create landings in Burma, but it's practically impossible to do landings in China. Watch what we just did. we discussed a problem statement, and we arrived at a judgment that is this easy or is this hard. Okay, could you do this a lot more? Could you face a wide array of problems in the world where somebody says that we need to manipulate the exchange rate, we need to stabilize inflation, we need to build an atom bomb, we need to do polio vaccination. Okay, there are all kinds of, there's a clamor of diverse demands for state intervention. Could we arrive at some framework, some concept, some toolkit whereby we can come up with an oral conversation judgment that, you know, this thing looks relatively easy, this thing looks relatively hard? Amazingly enough, the answer is yes, we do have this kind of toolkit. Before I get into the actual material of what that toolkit is and how it works, I just want to tell a little bit of a story around how these ideas came about. This originated in a paper in 2004 by Lant Pritchett and Michael Woolcock. They did an early version of this, and Vijay Kelkar and I built on their work, and we extended and augmented it, and Lant would agree that our version is a bit better.
Land does agree that your version is a bit better, because do check out my episode of The Seen and the Unseen with Land Pritchett, and also my episode with Ajay Shah, which is the last one, Life in Time, 10.5 hours, but I've got 14 episodes with you. You are at this moment tied with our good friend Pranay Kotasane. So yeah, it's a good battle. Who's going to win? So let's get down to the metrics. What are the 4 tests that we can apply to figure out whether intervention is hard or easy?
Okay, so first let's just be clear. We are faced with a problem statement. We want to do universal smallpox vaccination, okay? Or we want to build highways, or we want to make the police work. Okay, that's the way we're going to pose problems. And when faced with any of these problems, here are 4 tests through which such questions should be judged. Test 1. Is there a low number of transactions? Is there a high number of transactions? So if you want to do anything that touches the population where there is a large number of people and you're literally engaging with millions of people, then it's a high number of transactions. That's more difficult. Whereas if something has to be done just by a few people, then there's a low number of transactions. So we did an episode on innovation. In innovation policy, what would you want to do? You want a government to maybe put out 500 research grants a year. So there's 500 transactions. Whereas if you want to go do a polio vaccination, you want to touch 500 million people. So a higher number of transactions is more difficult to organize than a lower number of transactions. Okay, so that's test 1, number of transactions. Test 2, discretion. Do the frontline workers, do the civil servants actually doing this work have a high amount of discretion? Do they have a low amount of discretion? And again, it's obvious that if the frontline employees have a high amount of discretion, then you have a bigger management problem. How will we create the checks and balances, the accountability mechanisms through which those frontline civil servants will do the work that is consistent with the objectives of the organization, as opposed to their own self-interest? Okay, so we are all deeply wired to be kind to our friends and family and our kith and kin. We have tribalistic loyalties. So when there is discretion, people will always use it in ways that are often incompatible with the objectives of the organization. So when there is low discretion, it is better. When there is high discretion, it is worse. It is harder to make a government intervention work when there is high discretion. This is the Pritchett and Woolcock formulation: number of transactions, number of amount of discretion. Then we go further. I think it's very important to think about the stakes. What is at stake? Okay, is it some small piddly amount of money or some minor inconvenience, or is it high stakes? So a policeman who can put you in jail, now the conversation between you and the policeman is a high stakes conversation, because suddenly you're in the hands of a civil servant who can make discretionary decisions this way or that way, and that shapes whether you go to jail or not go to jail. That's a high stakes conversation. It's very difficult to get that policeman to perform as per the objectives of the organization, as opposed to exploiting the power in that face-to-face conversation. Whereas there are things that are low stakes, that Imagine there is somebody coming around doing a polio vaccination. The stakes are modest. There's nothing much that will happen. So frankly, the frontline civil servant has very low power vis-a-vis the person, the kid who's getting the polio vaccination. So then we say that low stakes problems are easy, high stakes problems are difficult. Okay. Finally, number 4, transparency, opacity. Okay. If something is done in a highly open environment where a lot of information is given out, there's plenty of data coming out, in a way there is a body cam watching the policeman, okay, then it becomes easier to get it right, because you will get checks and balances. You will get the forces of the society, the watchers, the people watching the body cam, the people working with data who are able to criticize the working of the government. You get the whole feedback loop of criticism. Okay, and that of course presumes a free and open information ecosystem that people have to be able to criticize. But if there's a government process that is transparent, where metrics come out, enough information comes out, so that the people and the journalists and the researchers and the intellectuals and the opposition parties are able to kick up a fuss saying, so many bad things are happening in this space, then that is good, meaning it will create the checks and balances. Automatically, the frontline civil servants, the managers of the civil servants, will end up doing a better job. Whereas, if things are done in the dark, if things are done under opacity, so just imagine if there was no CAG, okay? If there was no RTI, if there was no transparency about what is being done, if there was no statistics, if no documents are being released, then like anything can be done. That government can go do all kinds of difficult, dangerous, monstrous things, and you will go far away from any reasonable objective of the government, because those people have truly got raw, arbitrary power in their hands. So test 4, transparency. That if it's high transparency, it's an easier problem. If it's low transparency, it's a difficult problem. Okay. So to summarize, 4 tests. Test 1, is it a high number of transactions? That's more difficult. Is it a high level of discretion? That's more difficult. Are there high stakes? That's more difficult. Is there high opacity? That's more difficult. Okay. So we have a clear toolkit, and you don't even need paper and pen. You can just memorize this. And so then every time you're sitting around in a hostel room debating inflation targeting, you'll be able to roll out this toolkit and immediately analyze the policy proposal and say, hey dude, this one is an easy problem. This one is a difficult problem.
I love this toolkit and I love these metrics because all 4 of them, and by the way, I must commend you on, uh, uh, adding number 3 and number 4. Typically one of the things that you have aimed for in your work, and I told you, hey, don't bring your paper wala goals to the show, but your paper wala goals is every time you write a paper, you refuse to put it out unless it has some novel insight or whatever. And I think, Pritchett and Woolcock, to begin with, it was a breakthrough to come up with those 2. And what you and Dr. Kelkar have done to come up with these 2 is quite excellent. So I'm very happy for you. Finally, an episode with novel insights. And what I also love about them is, and this is for you gentle readers to think about, is how all of them play at that interplay between the objectives of the state and the incentives of the employee. Right, all of them play at that, and figuring that out, disentangling that is the great challenge of making the state work efficiently. So to me, this is both an excellent and a complete toolkit in a manner of speaking. I can't really think of anything I would add here.
Yeah. So it starts at public choice theory. The government is not a Maibab. The government is not a mythological creature of infinite capability. The government is a deeply flawed creature. Okay, let's open the box and start thinking. Can I analyze alternative problems, landings in Burma versus landings in China? And so we start getting this nice toolkit. So I actually loved the Pritchett and Woolcock paper, because the very question they asked was so insightful. It was great that you even asked that question.
They asked the right question,
they
which
asked
is
the right
often
question.
so elusive.
Yeah, it is such a insight to even ask that question. Whereas, in normal mainstream Indian economics and policy, everyone blithely runs forward that by my values, we should be pursuing objective X. So come on, let's go do it. People don't take implementation challenges seriously, and even less this way of thinking. I could be doing 10 different things before we decide to plunge into the battle. Can we judge, is this easy, is it hard? And then we can ration our resources, we can allocate our resources. Maybe we will say to each other that, look, objective 10, it's a lovely objective, it would be so cool if we could do it, but it's really hard, we're swamped, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough management effort, so just let it go, we won't be able to win this one. Whereas objective 3, this one looks easy by the 4 tests, and at our current state of management capability and public administration and money, finally money is a great resource to overcome all these problems, we will be able to win on number 3. So this kind of sophisticated conversation is conspicuously absent in Indian public affairs, and I feel it would be a great step forward for all of us if we could embark on this kind of conversation.
Actually, it is conspicuously absent only now that we have brought it to people's attention. Before this, it was unconspicuously absent because nobody knew it was missing. Words matter. So, Ajay, I'm going to do the writer thing and tell you now that don't tell me, show me, show, don't tell. So, give me some examples and let's like tease it out on where those particular examples, like monetary policy, for example, fall on all of these 4 metrics.
Yeah. So one of the happy days in my life was when I first figured out some of these things, and I had an op-ed. The title was "Monetary Policy is Easy, Financial Regulation is Hard." Okay, that is a great aha moment for me, because we tend to blur all these things. Yeah, central bank, monetary policy, inflation targeting, banking regulation. We just think of it in one blur. But it was a huge moment for me when I understood so crystal clear that monetary policy done right with an inflation target is actually quite easy. Financial regulation is hard and will always be hard, and there is no way out. Let's think about that. Monetary policy. Okay, so I don't want Stone Age monetary policy. There was a lot of bad things in the world. Let's only discuss modern, high quality, sensible monetary policy structures. You've got a properly structured central bank. There's no currency trading. The capital account is open. You're only doing inflation targeting. Okay, so no capital controls, no playing with the exchange rate. We have an episode on capital controls. You know what? We should have an episode on capital controls.
Let's do an episode on capital controls, but not right now. We need to finish this first, Rajesh.
Yeah. But one of these days we'll do a episode on the capital control. So we've got an episode on exchange rate management, and we are going to play it simple, that there is inflation targeting and there's nothing else. How does this work? As an inflation target, 4%. 6 times a year there's a committee that meets. Okay, the monetary policy committee, 5 people, properly structured. It should be 1 RBI governor and 4 independent private economists who owe nothing to the government. Okay, so they will vote independently. Each of them looks at the world, forms a judgment that is the economy set on a track where inflation will be above 4 or below 4. If they believe that in the future inflation is headed to worsen above 4, they will vote in favor of raising rates. If not, they'll vote in favor of cutting rates. Okay, simple. Now, what does it take to implement this? Let's go one by one. Transactions. 6 transactions a year. That's it. For the rest in the year, you're sleeping. So for all the hype and mystique around monetary policy, actually it's a trivial, easy problem. You need to get 6 decisions correct per year. You need to have 4 competent private economists on top of 1 great RBI governor hire, and you're done. It's not complicated. Okay, you'll need some RBI staff who will work with data and do some prediction models and all that, but this is not hard. Okay, so number of transactions, low. Amount of discretion, low. Why? Because a properly structured inflation targeting system is clear. Deliver me that 4% and persuade me, like you have to write a document. Each of the 5 voters has to write a document. What did you see in the economy? Why do you think interest rates should be raised, or why do you think interest rates should be cut? So actually, you don't have a whole lot of discretion. There's objective evidence. You form a view about the economy, and based on that, you say whether the rate should go up or the rate should go down. It's not your discretion. It's your judgment about what's going to happen to inflation. And if you make too many mistakes, you will be the laughing stock, because people will be saying this guy doesn't understand that inflation is going to go up or inflation is going to go down. So it's not like you have discretion. Okay, so it is low discretion. So low number of transactions, low discretion. Stakes. You're a member of the monetary policy committee. You're an economist. You have no stakes. There's nothing going on. It's just your reputation. So if you vote repeatedly in a wrong way, you lose reputation, you lose respect. That the people who fail to understand the future trajectory of inflation on average over steady state will lose respect. But for the rest, there's no high stakes gamble. Nobody's going to go to jail. There's no billions of dollars involved. It's a low stakes battle. And Opacity. This can be fully transparent. Everything can be public domain. So what is the process involved? Some internal staff will amass some statistics, make some forecasting models, make some predictions. Please release that document. Then 5 people will vote. Please release the details of the voting and have each of them write a rationale document about why did you vote. Done. There's nothing else. So monetary policy is easy because it is low number of transactions, low discretion, low stakes, and low opacity. Properly structured, meaning you can screw this up. You can have a third world country with a badly structured monetary policy arrangement. But once you learn all this, and you see, this is the public administration logic around the modern monetary policy committee design and the inflation targeting system, that you can get this right, that we have a decent chance at implementing this and a high chance at success. So this is story number one, monetary policy. Now let's turn to financial regulation. Okay, imagine there are 1000 financial firms in the country and you have prudential regulation, you have consumer protection, you have a bunch of things going on. Transactions is just horrible. You got 1000 firms, probably there'll be a touch point with each of the 1000 firms probably twice a year. Okay, it should not be more than that. I know it can get much worse than that in a bad public administration system, but in a reasonable system, we probably have 2000 touch points per year. It's a lot more. Whereas for monetary policy, we had 6 touch points a year or 4 touch points a year. So high number of transactions. Discretion, yeah, lots and lots of discretion. A civil servant is looking at a bank and saying, I'm not convinced about your asset recognition. Is this an NPA? Is this not an NPA? Look, it's a judgment. And the civil servant has discretion saying, I agree with this, I don't agree with this. So there's lots of discretion in the way in which civil servants will supervise, will do investigations. Okay, the messy stuff we discussed in the regulation episode. So yeah, discretion high. Stakes. The stakes are billions of dollars. Okay, there are people trading, there are people building companies, getting a market cap on the companies. Finance is one of the biggest sectors. All that wealth is the stakes, because depending on how a financial regulator chooses to play this way or that way, it can shatter business models, it can destroy the lives of individuals. The stakes are sky high, that what the individuals in financial regulation on the government side can do has massive consequences for the people that they face. The people that they face tremble in front of the financial regulator. Okay, so the stakes are high. Opacity, yeah, most of that supervisory process happens in secrecy because they're not telling you what data did I get from which firm, I went and did an investigation, I found these things wrong. All this is shrouded in secrecy. So transactions high, discretion high, stakes high, opacity high, 4 on 4. See the contrast? Monetary policy is easy, financial regulation is difficult. Okay, suddenly we've got a toolkit, we've got the ability to look at a problem. If you didn't have this toolkit, you'd be kind of thinking, yeah, some economisty things, monetary policy, inflation sounds difficult to me, banking regulation sounds difficult to me. They sound about the same. No, with this toolkit, we know that for a third world country like India, it is reasonably easy. You only have to get a law properly drafted, like the Indian Financial Code done by FSLRC, and it's reasonably easy to build and roll out an inflation targeting system. Small associated pieces need to be done, that you need to get the composition of the monetary policy right, monetary policy committee right. You need to float the exchange rate, don't be intervening in the exchange rate market, have an open capital account. Once you've got all this, it's an easy problem. Banking regulation, truly difficult problem. In the United States, you will suffer doing banking regulation as they have. Okay, nice. 2 examples. Shall I keep going with more examples?
So Ajay, let's do it like this. Let's imagine a table on the screen right now, which the viewer is seeing, but you are not. And here the columns have your 4 metrics and the rows have the interventions. The first 2 are already laid out, monetary policy and financial regulation, and there are 4 empty rows. So I am going to, in an impromptu way, suggest policies, and you rank them according to the 4 metrics and tell me how easy or how hard. Number 3, elementary schools.
Yeah. So India has famously failed on getting elementary schooling going. Let's think a little more about what's at stake. So number of transactions high, discretion actually very high. So think deeply about it. The teacher in the class has complete discretion. Do I teach? Do I not teach? Do I make eye contact with the kids? Do I not make eye contact with the kids? When they don't understand, do I just thunder on, or do I try 3 times harder? Do I teach to the genius Amit Varma in my front row, or do I worry about the people in the backbenches who are ignoring my class completely? There's a lot of discretion. So elementary education, high discretion. Stakes. The stakes are actually low. So if I am a teacher and I do a bad job, what am I stealing? I'm stealing some wage of a school teacher in a appropriately priced environment. It's probably 10,000 rupees a month. It's not a very high stakes thing. So stakes is not a problem. Secrecy. It doesn't have to be secret at all. We can create enough transparency around it through a variety of means. So bottom line is, it's high discretion, high transactions. It can be low opacity, and it can be and it is low stakes.
2 out of 4.
2 out of 4.
Great. And by the way, I was always a backbencher. So yeah, you don't insult me in Amit Varma in the front bench. What are you saying? I never sat on a front bench. HPV campaign.
Okay. So vaccination campaigns have high transactions. Okay, but there's really no discretion at all. Like, it's a fixed protocol. Catch a person, fire this, 22 days later, you do the second, or a polio drop. There's absolutely no discretion. There's no stakes. The frontline worker has nothing to gain by threatening to withhold it or supply it or whatever. And transparency, there can be complete transparency. So this is easy. It's not difficult to run a program like this.
1 out of 4 again. Okay, I'm going to give you a tough one. You're going to suffer with this. Judiciary.
Judiciary, very high number of transactions, ultimate discretion, ultimate high stakes, and there can be a certain amount of transparency, but really a lot of things happen behind closed doors. 3 judges on a bench, their conversation should be secret. It should not be public domain. So 3.5 out of 4.
Wow. What about taxation? Your favorite subject?
Taxation. High number of transactions, high discretion in the hands of the tax officer, high stakes, sky high stakes. You're talking thousands of crore of rupees for big accounts, and complete opacity. So horrible problem. 4 on 4.
No, this is fantastic. And what I love about this metric is, like, now forever I have this table in my head and I can apply anything to this. And that's the reason to have metrics. Not everything is precisely measurable, but the more you attempt to measure something, the more clarity you gain in thinking about it. Like you said, that fuzzy feeling that, this is easy or that is hard, the less fuzzy you are, the better the decision making can be. And therefore, a table like this is supremely helpful. I want you to build tables like this for me in every area of my life, so all my decision making becomes easy. Will you do that,
I want to
Ajay?
add to that, this also protects us from our familiarity. So imagine I'm a finance guy. I might find some mystique in monetary policy. Oh my God, you guys deal with interest rates. Okay, complicated forecasting of inflation. That sounds very strange to me. Banking, I'm cat's whiskers, I know banking. So I may think banking regulation is easy. Monetary policy is alien to me. That doesn't mean it's hard. It just means you got to get the right expertise. So this protects us from our own vulgar familiarity, and it gives us a more objective way to rate the complexity of alternative problems, and then also to be able to argue about it with each other. We get a common intellectual framework through which we can discuss these things.
And this is the starting point. I mean, people can put different weightages on each of these metrics and, do their own math in that sense. And we haven't even come to the question of, how the interplay between how hard something is and how important it is to do something. That's an entirely separate thing. We'll come to that at the end.
Yeah.
But, so I love this. Well done. So, Ajay Shah, in your heart, I know you're a hacker. Can you hack this?
So it is interesting to stare at a row and say, look, I really want to do this, but it's so hard. Can I do better? Okay. So in a way, think conceptually about how we came to modern monetary policy. It is because we wanted to solve a messy problem. We had opacity, we had a powerful governor who could do whatever they wanted, etc. And modern monetary policy based on an inflation target and a monetary policy committee dominated by private economists with complete transparency was actually hacking the components. So we changed our whole paradigm of how to think about this in order to make it easy. Okay, so I want to take you to another similar example. In 2005, I had a paper on the role of IT in governance. Okay, it was not at all about digital public goods or anything like that. It was just this one idea that many times you can take a high transactions, high discretion component and render it manageable using an IT system. Okay, so high transactions. What is so hard about high transactions? It's about pieces of paper and managing information and transmitting information from one office to another office, or pieces of paper getting counterfeited and so on. And so that's where a good IT system can help. That in the hands of a bad IT system, high transactions can be quite challenging, but one can conceive that, I'll just like computerize the hell out of this and suddenly the problem will go away. Similarly, discretion. Okay, so in 2005, my mind was still heavily inside the glory of the railway reservation system, which at the time was new. Okay, let's pause to think about it. In the olden days, the booking status of a given seat on a given train was in a piece of paper. It was in a register. It was kept inside the railway office. So when you went and spoke with the person at the ticket counter, that person had complete discretion. He could lie to you. He could say, there's no ticket here. Okay. And that discretion was in the hands of the frontline worker at the ticketing window of the railway system. Once we got a simple computer system done, just put this in a database which is openly and transparently available to the whole world, ideally through using an API. You don't need the government to run IRCTC. I will link to one video on this. You just need the government to open up an API, and then clear trip and make my trip will be in your system. Now at that point, there is no discretion anymore. It's black and white. Seat number 2A, is it taken? Is it not taken? So conceptually, that is the value that IT systems bring. It is to remove discretion from the frontline civil servant and thereby convert a component from hard to easy. So we should be looking at these problem statements and wondering, is there a way in which I can redesign the policy so as to convert it into an easy problem?
So, one really useful frame I use to think about the state is something I learned from Francis Fukuyama when he talks about scope and strength, right? And scope is how many things a state does, and strength is how well it does what it does. And India's state is very high in terms of scope. We do many, many, many things, but our strength is very low. We do all of them very badly. Now, both you and I agree that what the Indian state should do is it should do a few things well, not many things badly. And now, given that I am learning these metrics from you, would it then be the case that the few things that the Indian state should do well are actually hard to do, which is why it is unable to do them well?
Yeah, that is a very important way to think about it. And it actually takes us to a deep implication of this way of thinking. So let's go step by step. I would like to first read one of the greatest quotes of all economics. This is from Adam Smith. Adam Smith says, "Little else is requisite to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence from the lowest barbarism, but peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice, all the rest being brought about by the natural course of things." Okay, so this is an absolutely great quote. It's deep and insightful. It's one of the most fundamental pieces of knowledge about economics. And he's saying to us, little else is required but peace, easy taxes, and the tolerable administration of justice. Very well, let's dig into peace, easy taxes, and the tolerable administration of justice, and let's apply these 4 metrics. Okay, peace. Peace. Military, foreign affairs, police, criminal justice system, courts. Okay, horrible problems, high discretion, high stakes. Okay, extremely difficult problems. So peace is not easy. Taxes, we already talked, very difficult problem. Tolerable administration of justice, we already talked. Courts, judiciary,
Rule of
very
law,
difficult
very
problems.
hard.
Rule of law, very difficult problems. So suddenly we get a new insight into the world that little else is required, but what is required is very hard. It's a big ask that if somebody says to Jawaharlal Nehru in 1947 that you should be working on peace, easy taxes, and the tolerable administration of justice. Then he should not brush it off. He's saying, yeah, that's all good, but we also need to go to land reform. We should be saying, wow, peace, very hard. Easy taxes, very hard. Tolerable administration of justice, very hard. We have our hands full. We are swamped. Don't give me anything more to do. For 100 years, I just got to get this shit. So our conclusion should be that it is very hard to do these basics. So don't do mission creep. Don't add to your problem. We need all the effort, all the focus, all the resources. What are resources? Resources are money. Resources are labor, the sheer headcount of civil servants. Most important, the resources are the time, the attention of the thinkers, of the researchers, of the research and reform community, of the leadership. So what a chief minister does from morning to evening determines what gets done. So if the chief minister from morning to evening is doing meetings on peace, on easy taxes, on the tolerable administration of justice, they'll get done. But if the chief minister is distracted doing all sorts of other unrelated things, these things will not get done. These are scarce resources. There's a budget constraint in state capability. Yes, we have horrible shortages of management, of senior leadership, of research and reform teams in the country. So we should be lavishing these on this core. Why? Because this is required. It is essential. You can't make progress to becoming a successful economy without these. And by God, these are difficult. These are not easy problems. It's a huge challenge. It'll take 50 years, 100 years to figure these out. And so we should just try to say no to every other calendar entry. We should just say peace, easy taxes, and the tolerable administration of justice is what we're going to do.
And at this point, I want to clarify, gentle readers, that the metrics that we laid out are not metrics for importance, they're metrics for how hard something is. And just because something is very hard doesn't mean that it should not be done. Like all of these three things that Adam Smith points out, number one, as you say, they are necessary. They are so necessary that they're non negotiable. If you don't have them, the rest doesn't matter. And as Smith also points out, they are practically sufficient. That if you get these right, everything else falls into place. And therefore, you have to do them. You have to focus on these. And after you get these right, then maybe you think about other stuff. And I'm reminded of the metaphor of the drunk man who one night is looking under a lamppost for something. So a policeman, a good policeman in a country with rule of law, goes up to him and says, "My friend, what are you looking for? Can I help you?" So the drunk man says, "I am looking for my key." So the policeman says, "I will help you find your key." And the policeman, with great humility and the sense of service, looks for the key, and they look for it for some time, but they can't find it. And then a thought strikes him, and he asks the drunk man, or he doesn't call him drunk man. He says, "Sir," because that is...
He says Beuda.
No, that's India. We're talking about good rule of law. He says, "Sir, can you please tell me where did you drop the key?" And the drunk man says, "Oh, over there in the bushes where it's very dark and all that." So the policeman says, "And why are you looking here?" And he says, "Because this is where the light is." And I worry that a lot of us, we try to get to easy problems that are inconsequential and don't really move the needle, rather than solve the hard ones. And by the way, this is the same metaphor I used at the start of my episode with Land Pritchett, because this is my sort of metaphor to talk about RCTs, that RCTs are solving inconsequential, easy problems simply because they're attributable and measurable, and it's a great fraud on the field of economics. The tough problems are difficult, fuzzy, and that's what a real man tries to solve, and Land Pritchett is a real man. The same metaphor, by the way, I found out was also used almost simultaneously by the great scholar Yoon Ang in this fantastic paper called Adaptive Political Economy. So I wrote to her, in fact, and we exchanged emails, and just she'll be on the scene and the unseen someday after she finishes a very important book that she is writing. But it's a great metaphor, and yeah, drunk man, lamppost, where did you drop the keys? Ajay Shah, any parting words before your 7 recommendations?
On a related note, I have a classification scheme of the side fights that you would pick up. Okay, so actually you should be doing, meaning you, the policymakers, the thinkers of India, the research and reform teams of India, should be doing peace, easy taxes, and the tolerable administration of justice. And everybody takes some exit ramp or the other, because these things are hard. Okay, so I have a classification scheme. There are 2 kinds of ramps. One is to do welfareism. So you go do social justice. Okay. So there are always humanitarian projects that a government can do, and you get that satisfaction that there are some children, I fed them lunch. And I'm not solving the hard problems, but I'm doing that. The other ramp is unique to a person who is called an engineer, which is we'll go build an IT system. Okay, so we'll build an app, we'll build a website. So riffing on P. Sainath's book, Everybody Loves a Good Drought, in Kelkar and Shah, we have a section which is titled Everybody Loves a Good IT System. It's harmless, it's hassle-free. Some software vendor builds an app, some software vendor builds a website. You celebrate, you'll inaugurate it, nothing will get done, we're fine. What? No one was saved, Eleanor Rigby. So that's what happens with an IT system.
You're not a fan of engineers, I noticed. Ajay Shah, in our last episode, you promised 7 recommendations. You better have 7 recommendations.
So first, I just touched on a beautiful Beatles song called Eleanor Rigby. Father Mackenzie wiping the dirt from his hands as he walks from the grave. No one was saved. Okay, that's how I think about government IT systems. Okay. Second, I have 2 recommendations from a 1984 U2 album, which is called Unforgettable Fire. One is called Bad and one is called Promenade. So they're 2 songs that are absolutely great. Okay. Third, Radiohead, No Surprises. There's a beautiful cover by Regina Spektor. I absolutely love it. I love the original as well. It's one of those schizophrenic things in my head that I just absolutely love both versions. Regina Spektor grew up in Russia. She lives in the West and she's got a great version of this. Okay. Then 5, I love the song Suzanne by Leonard Cohen. Okay. It's a really, really deep song. It's just one of the great songs to know. Okay. 6, there's a 70s band called Bread that most people have forgotten. I recommend a song called Aubrey. 7, this is, I thought, was a piece of nostalgia for me. I grew up around an LP at home by Jaya Bose and Himanshu Biswas, and there was a little Bhatyali dhun at the end. And just after all these years, I love it so much, and I've decided it's not mere nostalgia, it's something truly cool. So 7 pieces of music.
8 actually, because one of them you named 2 songs from that 84 album. So I'm very pleased with you. So since we should also give recommendations, I'll also give music because why not? One of my favorite songs of all time, Madam George by Van Morrison, and 2 covers of that. There's a glorious ethereal cover of that by Marianne Faithfull. And recently, when I was in hospital, in fact in January, I discovered another great cover version of that by the Irish singer-songwriter Luca Bloom. So both fantastic covers of an absolutely epic classic song, which I love. And since you mentioned Leonard Cohen, there came to mind a great cover of a song of his. This is by Greg Dooley of the Afghan Wigs. It's a song called Paper Thin Hotel, and it's an absolute masterpiece. I think I played it for you once. And yeah, so it's a great, great song, and that is my second recommendation of today. So what a fun way to end an episode. And it was a fun episode, wasn't it?
Yeah. And we've got a Beatles song about IT systems.
We've got a Beatles song about IT systems.